So Hollywood, you and I were both very fortunate. I still count myself as one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me to be Top Gun instructors.
Truly.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about why Top Gun was started in the first place? What is that place all about?
Well, everybody's heard the story, right? But back in the Vietnam days, the kill ratio of Navy pilots was unacceptable. I think well, often throughout this podcast, for the next 10 minutes, as long as it lasts, I want to just, my disclaimer is I am very old. I'm confused. I've embellished stories for 40 years. So I'm sure that I'm inaccurate in a lot of ways. But I recall that it started because we were not doing very well there. And they brought back some guys who had learned some hard lessons that were experienced in the airplanes. Dan Pedersen was I believe was sort of like the tip of the spear, and said, "Hey, gather a cadre of guys and let's do some sort of lessons learned. Let's see if we can, get these guys on the step." And that was the initial push to initiate the Top Gun school. And I believe it was commissioned in 1971, but it started in 1969, and then and that's what it grew into. Now it went from a very small group of guys to what we were at, which was still
a trailer,
in a trailer, to Hangar 1, and it still was relatively a small group of guys. I think, Jaws, when you and I were there at any one time, because guys coming and going, IUTing and stepping out, we maybe had 16 to 18 at the most, fully qualified pilots and 4 or 5 backseaters, and now it's gone on to be, quite a large and impressive organization. So, but as I mentioned to the at last year's Top Gun reunion, 55th anniversary, was talking to some of the young current staff members, very impressive group of people. And I was listening to some of the things they were talking about. I said, compared to what you guys are doing, back then we were rubbing sticks together to make fire and, painting on cave walls. And in a lot of ways, that's sort of true. But then they can't counter with a very respectful and nice answer and said, "Hey, if it wasn't for you guys doing that, we wouldn't be here." So we stand on the shoulder of giants, as we always say there. So
how does one get assigned as a pilot to the staff at Top Gun? Is that a normal career progression, or?
It's really different now, and I haven't been read in, as they say. But I know back in the day when Jaws and I were there, at the completion of a class after graduation, we were required to, every member of the staff would read the critiques, and the students were required to write a critique on every academic event and every flight that we did. So once we said goodbye, congratulations, here's your patch, they flew off to the sunset, and we locked ourselves in a room and whiteboarded everything. And literally, depending on what your lecture was, your area of expertise, or what you did, we basically, took on board the critiques, the valid ones certainly, and the idea was to continue to evolve the program, the class, right, the lectures that we gave. And then at the end of that, we put all the students' names up on the board. And we literally went around the room, and then it was a very unkind, objective, harsh. A lot of guys were like, "That guy's an idiot," and you literally would, and then out of maybe one class, we wouldn't get anybody's name that was left on the board, but we collected a list of potential future instructors. And the idea was back then, and it's different now, but back then, you went through Top Gun. The idea was to go back. You've just gone through this graduate level course. You were to go back to your squadron / air wing, and you were the tactics instructor, the weapons training officer, along with your backseater. And the idea was, at least, by reputation and by your deeds, continue to keep your finger on the pulse as a staff. And then we would look for future draft choices, right? So evidently somehow made a mistake, left my name on the whiteboard. I went back to VF-32, did a whole nother deployment. And then lo and behold, I was coming up for orders. I had actually requested and received verbal orders to do an exchange tour with the Air Force. So I actually wanted to fly the F-15 because I just like giant fighters that you could see from 50 miles away. So I flew the F-14. I wanted to fly the F-15, and they had verbals to go to Holloman Air Force Base. And then I'd gotten word that I was selected to go to Top Gun.
So I would add on to that a little bit, Hollywood. It was really rare for somebody to come through the class who we would label an idiot. These were really, for the most part, really good. So in order to make it on that list, and it was a secret list, nobody knew about it except us and the people who made assignments. And so that's why Hollywood and I are still wondering to this day how we ever made it through.
Well,
Yeah.
just to get back to my idiot comment, my point was we were pretty ruthless in that room, and yes, of course, there were guys that came through that. There wasn't really any slackers. I'd say I was there for almost 44 months. I can't remember how many classes that was, but every once in a while we'd have somebody that came through that was casting an attitude as if he really had nothing to learn from us because he had it all figured out. And usually by the end of the first week, which was 1v1 week, hat in hand, they recognized that they should probably be quiet, sit down and listen. But yeah, to be selected just to go to the school was a major accomplishment. And so, but my term idiot was just because we were bloody ruthless in that room. So,
absolutely. So pulling the curtain back a little bit further, one of the things that, we all, I was a pilot at Miramar when, where Top Gun was based. So I got to watch these guys all the time. And it's like, here are the guys in the blue suits and they're really good and they're really smart. And they know every single thing that happened and why it happened on a particular flight that I would have with them. And there's a reason for that. And it has a lot to do with once you get to the staff as an instructor, what you go through just to be allowed to fly against the class or to teach a course to the class. So talk a little bit about that, Hollywood. It's a tough
I think when you show up there, I mean, I don't know what your experience was, but I mean, honestly, I walked in there like they're going to figure out today, but I have no business being here. I mean, these guys were all high-speed alpha males raging through that place at 120% all the time. And I was thinking, what am I doing here? And everything you do, whether it's your lecture prep, the research you have to do to take that on, to go through the IUT syllabus, 2 different airplanes, the harshest audience, the hardest audience, the toughest debrief you will ever be in and I don't mean that like the whole idea was to polish the product, right? But it was the hardest audience you'll ever give a lecture to. It's the most grinding, and because they expect you to be that good because the students and the program requires you to be that good. So it was challenging. It was very satisfying when you finally got through your murder board, whether it was your first one or your second one or your third one. You gave your lecture and you gave your briefs and debriefs to staff members who had been down there, and it was a grind. But it was, and honestly, I used to say every day I walked in the place, I'm like, I was there for a long time. I'd walk in there and like, okay, today's the day they figure out that I just can't keep up with these guys. So you always brought your A game. You had to, because it was some impressive people there.
Yeah, you used the term murder board. That term originated at Top Gun, and a lot of our listeners have probably experienced that in one way, shape, or form when they're preparing a brief for an investment thing or something like that. But it was, you give a 1-hour lecture and the debrief would be 5, 6, 7 hours. It was that brutal.
Yeah, they were brutal, thorough.
And you might not pass.
Oh yeah, no, it was not unusual to basically go, okay, good try, get back to work, go polish that up, like in a big way. So it was quite a process.
So talk a little bit about the culture then, because it sounds like highly competitive environment, a lot of brilliant people. Everyone's used to excelling at the top of their game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a little bit like the astronaut office, but that's what kind of culture did that set up, and how would you describe it for the staff and maybe the students both?
I think it made you very, very seldom do you ever walk in there and take your pack off and go, today's going to be an easy day. And when we say competitive, it was competitive because we all held each other to that standard, but it was a brotherhood. There was a bond there. We're all rooting for each other, to be able to sit in a brief, to be a part of someone else's brief, to step in and watch somebody else give a lecture that you murder boarded, to take part in a multi-plane exercise and come back. And not only see the instructors brief, lead it and debrief it, to see the students through the course of the class go through it was very satisfying. So I always felt like everybody was in my corner. You had to prove yourself when you got there. I mean, there was some, and again, different personalities, right? Some guys were very welcoming and very nurturing to a certain extent. Other guys were very much like, hey, I want to hear anything from you, I'll ask you. Otherwise, just join up, shut up. And maybe that was a good cop, bad cop, routine. But we had the perfect mix of confident swag. I hate to use the word ego because so many people accuse, people in this line of work of being, having giant egos. And I would often offer that I think that an overabundance of confidence was required and often misinterpreted as ego. Sure, we had egos, but, and so you both can relate to this. If you're in that line of work or in the line of work that you were from, Sandra, if you don't think you're the best at what you do, you have no business being there. But to walk in that place, and on any given day, you'd go out and fight a 1v1 with the Jaws or Carrot or any of the guys that we served with, Rat. Certainly, some of those guys were great drivers. And you just went out there and on any given day, you found out, that there are a lot of guys that are better than you, a lot of guys that aren't. But all of those guys were always striving to do the absolute best job they could do every day. And it didn't stop. It was a sweatshop. I mean, I was there for, I don't know, like I said, a long time. And I don't know how much leave I took, but I know how much I gave up. I burned a lot of leave just letting it go away because we were so busy. We'd do a class and hell, we'd do a week with the class. And all of a sudden we had, hey, Friday afternoon after the debrief, we need 2 guys to fly up to El Toro because we're doing a weekend dead against the Marines up there. And we'd fly up there in the afternoon after we did a full day, do double cycles Saturday, give a couple of mini lectures, work Sunday, fly back and go back to work Monday. Wow. That was kind of standard.
That's intense.
We were on the whole time. So,
of course, we acted like we didn't like it, but we actually did like it. But
yeah, I mean, right for that. Although I will say that there's a burnout factor to it. I mean, when I was leaving, Wiggs was our CO at the time. God rest his soul. And I remember after his debriefing, my fitness report, he goes, "Hey, Hollywood, do you have anything for me?" And I said, "Yes, Skipper. Don't ever let anyone stay here this long again because the brain damage is permanent."
Yeah.
And anyway, but it was a great place to be. It was a great place to be. And I am thankful for every day I had there, really. And for the people who I met.